Hello and welcome to MBKM Models. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe and follow for more great aircraft documentaries and model build videos.
France has now been defeated, and despite the propaganda and confusion of recent months, it is now obvious that England is losing the war. We cannot win this war for England regardless of how much assistance we send. That is why the America First Committee has been formed.
I was born in my grandfather's council house in 1964 and grew up with my parents and grandparents until I was 9 years old in 1973. My grandfather, who was the same age group as Charles Lindbergh, never spoke a single word of far-right politics or racism. Both he and Charles Lindbergh were in the world when capitalism failed in 1929, where some people went for political extremes. My grandfather was into jazz and early radio, owning a crystal radio set. He was well educated, but anything connected with far-right politics didn't appeal to him. However, for Charles Lindbergh it did. For anyone who is younger listening to this, I grew up with this age group of people. The far-right, far-left divisions in 1930s society in the whole of the Western world was big. In the USA, the America First movement covered the far right, and in my country, the British League of Fascists, headed up by Sir Oswald Mosley, also took this position. The far left were mostly recruited from Cambridge University, where Misters Donald Maclean, Guy Burgess and Kim Philby gave the atomic bomb to the Soviets in the post-war era. All three men held the rank of major in the KGB whilst working for British intelligence. With that said, now let's have a look at Charles Lindbergh. Charles Lindbergh, February the 4th, 1902 to August the 26th, 1974, was an American aviator, military officer, author, inventor and activist. On May the 21st, 1927, Lindbergh made the first non-stop flight from New York City to Paris, a distance of 3,600 miles, flying alone for 33.5 hours. His aircraft, the Spirit of St. Louis, was designed and built by the Ryan Airline Company, specifically to compete for the Orteig Prize for the first flight between the two cities. Although not the first transatlantic flight, it was the first solo transatlantic flight, the first non-stop transatlantic flight between two major city hubs, and the longest by over 1,900 miles. It is known as one of the most consequential flights in history and ushered in a new era of air transportation between parts of the globe. Lindbergh was raised mostly in Little Falls, Minnesota and Washington, D.C., the son of prominent U.S. Congressman from Minnesota, Charles Augustus Lindbergh. He became a U.S. Army Air Service cadet in 1924, earning the rank of second lieutenant in 1925. Later that year, he was hired as a U.S. airmail pilot in the greater St. Louis area, where he started to prepare for his historic 1927 transatlantic flight. Lindbergh received the highest U.S. military decoration from President Calvin Coolidge, the Medal of Honor, as well as the Distinguished Flying Cross for his transatlantic flight. In July 1927, he was promoted to the rank of colonel in the U.S. Army Air Corps Reserve. The flight also earned him the highest French Order of Merit, civil or military, the Legion of Honor. His achievement spurred significant global interest in both commercial aviation and airmail, which revolutionized the aviation industry worldwide, a phenomenon dubbed the Lindbergh boom, and he spent much time promoting aviation. He was honoured as Time's First Man of the Year in 1928, was appointed to the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics in 1929 by President Herbert Hoover, and was awarded a Congressional Gold Medal in 1930. In 1931, he and French surgeon Alexis Carrel began working on inventing the first perfusion pump, which is credited with making future heart surgeries and organ transplantation possible. On March 1st, 1932, Lindbergh's firstborn infant child, Charles Jr., was kidnapped and murdered in what the American media called the crime of the century. The case prompted the United States Congress to establish kidnapping as a federal crime if a kidnapper crosses state lines with a victim. By late 1935, the press and the hysteria surrounding the case had driven the Lindbergh family into exile in Europe, from where they returned in 1939. In In the months before the United States entered World War II, Lindbergh's non-interventionist stance and statements about Jews and race led some to believe he was a Nazi sympathizer, although Lindbergh never publicly stated support for the Nazis and condemned them several times in both his public speeches and personal diary. However, like many Americans before the attack on Pearl Harbor, he opposed not only the military intervention of the US, but also the provision of military supplies to the British. After Lindbergh's comments about Jews, race, and taking a non-interventionist stance against the British, he was seen as a Nazi sympathizer. Following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and German declaration of war against the US, Lindbergh avidly supported the American war effort, but was rejected for active duty as Roosevelt refused to restore his Air Corps Colonel's commission. Instead, he flew 50 combat missions in the Pacific Theater as a civilian consultant and was unofficially credited with shooting down an enemy aircraft. In 1954, President Dwight Eisenhower restored his commission and promoted him to Brigadier General in the U.S. Air Force Reserve. In his later years, he became a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, international explorer, and environmentalist, helping to establish national parks in the U.S. and protect certain endangered species and tribal people in the Philippines and East Africa. In 1974, Lindbergh died of lymphoma at the age of 72. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and until next time.